on the vast golden plains of the African savanna, where the sky met the horizon in an endless blue, lived Eliakim, a traveler known in many villages for his wisdom and magical stories. Tall and with skin that glistened like ebony, Eliakim wore a red turban that contrasted with his simple garments adorned with ancestral symbols. Each symbol, he would say, represented a story from a distant land, a lesson carried to him by the wind. Eliakim was not just a storyteller, he was a herald of hope. His words danced like the flames of a fire, warming the hearts of those who listened. His stories were not mere accounts, but vivid portraits of courage, unity, and love that inspired entire villages to rise against adversity. Yet few knew the beginning of his journey, the force that had driven him to carry so many stories in his heart. Many years ago, Eliakim was a curious young man living in a village called Kwamkazi. The village, surrounded by lush green hills, was going through hard times. A drought had turned the fertile soil to dust, and the livestock withered under the merciless sun. Despair loomed like a dark cloud over the families, and many began to lose hope. One night, while walking alone under a starry sky, Eliakim encountered a mysterious old man sitting on a rock by the nearly dry river. The man had eyes that seemed to see beyond the present and a voice that resonated like the echo of a cavern. He held a staff carved with figures that seemed to come alive under the moonlight. "Who are you, young man?" the old man asked with a tone of curiosity. "I am Eliakim, son of the land that weeps for rain," the young man replied, sadness in his voice. The old man smiled, as if he saw something special in Eliakim. He extended the staff, and glowing figures began to dance across its surface. They were people, animals, mountains and rivers, all intertwined in a spectacle of light. "Each of us carries stories, Eliakim. They are the food of the soul, more vital than bread or water. You have the gift to hold them and share them. Do not let the despair of your village extinguish this flame," the old man said, handing the staff to the young man. "Travel, listen, learn, and bring back hope." When Eliakim raised his eyes to thank the man, he had vanished, leaving only the staff as a witness to their encounter. That night, Eliakim returned home feeling different, as though something greater was calling him. The next morning at dawn, Eliakim made the decision that would change his life forever. He would leave his village in search of stories and wisdom that could heal not only his land, but also the hearts of the people. He knew it would be a long journey, filled with challenges, but he felt the staff would be his guide. And so began the saga of Eliakim, the wise traveler. Leaving behind the dry fields of Kwamkazi, he ventured into unknown lands, his heart filled with determination. His footprints in the dust marked the beginning of a journey that would not only be his, but also for all who would hear his stories. As the sun rose on the horizon, Eliakim walked with firm steps, the staff glowing faintly in his hand, as if promising that wherever he went, he would find not only stories, but also hope. Eliakim's steps led him to unknown lands, where each day was a discovery and each night a lesson. His staff, given to him by the mysterious old man, seemed to vibrate softly in his hands, as if it had a life of its own. He soon realized that the object was not merely a carved piece of wood, but a guardian of stories. Whenever Eliakim encountered something extraordinary, the staff would respond, emitting a subtle glow and revealing new figures on its surface, as if capturing the moment. Eliakim's first stop was in the village of Umtunzi, known for its towering trees that provided shade even on the hottest days. However, upon arrival, the traveler noticed something was wrong. The villagers walked with their heads bowed, the children were silent, and even the birds seemed to have abandoned the place. Eliakim was greeted by an elderly woman named Mama Zula, the leader of the village. Her eyes reflected the same sadness that had gripped Kwamkazi months before. "Stranger, you are welcome, but we have little to offer," she said, pointing to the dry branches of the once lush trees. "I have not come to take what you have, Eliakim replied. "I have come to bring what you might need, a story." Mama Zula raised her eyebrows, intrigued. Stories did not fill bellies or refill dry wells, but something in Eliakim's voice stirred her curiosity. She led him to the village square, where all the villagers gathered around an extinguished fire pit. Eliakim began to speak, his words floating through the air like a melody. He told the tale of a village devastated by drought, where a small bird named Nkanyezi found a single seed and chose to plant it. Despite the harsh conditions, the bird watered the seed daily with drops it carried in its beak, until one day the plant grew and brought life back to the land. As he spoke, the staff began to glow. The carved figures on it started to move, and the villagers saw the little bird and the plant come alive before their eyes. The children drew closer, enchanted, while the adults murmured in awe. "The lesson is simple," Eliakim concluded. "Even in the most difficult circumstances, hope and action, no matter how small, can transform everything." After the story, something extraordinary happened. A gentle breeze swept through the square, rustling the dry branches of the trees. A single green leaf emerged at the top of the tallest tree, as if nature itself had heeded Eliakim's words. The villagers were astonished. Mama Zula approached him with tears in her eyes. "I don't know how, but your story has brought something back to us," she said. "Please stay and teach us more." Eliakim smiled, but he knew his journey could not end there. He explained that he was a traveler, and his purpose was to bring stories wherever they were needed. However, before departing, he taught the children to draw figures in the sand, replicating the bird Nkanyezi and the plant that had saved its village. He also encouraged each villager to plant a seed, watering it with the little water they had, so hope could continue to grow. The next morning, as he bid farewell, Eliakim noticed that the staff had changed once again. New figures had appeared, the bird, the plant, and the trees of Umthunzi. He realized that the staff was a witness to his journey, preserving each story so it would never be forgotten. As he walked toward the next village, Eliakim felt a renewed strength in his heart. He knew the journey would be long, but now he was certain that every place he visited would leave marks not only in his memory, but also in the hearts of those who heard his stories. After days of crossing golden savannas and clear rivers, Eliakim arrived at the Valley of Silence, a place shrouded in an almost supernatural stillness. Here, the wind did not blow, the birds did not sing, and even the sound of his own footsteps seemed to vanish. The air was heavy, as though the silence carried an invisible sorrow. Descending the hill into the valley, Eliakim found the small village of Lumbwe, nestled among shadowy mountains. The houses were made of clay and straw, but many were in ruins. Few villagers walked the streets, and those who did bore empty expressions, as if life had drained from them. There were no children playing, no songs in the air, only the oppressive weight of an endless silence. Curious, Eliakim approached a man sitting by a dry well. His face was etched with age and the burden of heavy thoughts. "Peace, brother. I am Eliakim, a traveler who brings stories from distant lands. What has happened to this village?" the traveler asked. The man raised his eyes slowly but said nothing. Eliakim tried again but received no response. He realized the man was not just sad, he was trapped in a silence that seemed to have stolen his voice. Intrigued, Eliakim made his way to the village square. There he found an elderly woman with eyes full of pain, clutching a straw doll to her chest as though it were her most precious possession. "Madam, why is this village so silent?" Eliakim asked, kneeling beside her. The woman sighed deeply before answering, as though the words themselves were too heavy to speak. Years ago, the Valley of Silence was filled with laughter and songs, but then the spirit of shadow came. It stole our voices as punishment for our quarrels and divisions. Now, only whispers of lament remain, and a void we cannot fill. Eliakim felt a chill. He had heard of the spirit of shadow in ancient tales, an entity that fed on despair and discord, leaving only silence in its wake. "And why does no one try to reclaim the village's voice?" he asked. The woman shook her head, disheartened. "We have tried, but we do not know how. Many have given up." Eliakim gripped his staff tightly, feeling its familiar vibration. He knew this was a story waiting to be written. He walked to the center of the square and raised his staff high. Then, he began to tell a story aloud, his voice echoing through the valley. There was once a village like this one, drowned in silence where everyone believed hope was lost. But a young boy found the courage to confront the spirit of shadow. He had no strength, but he had a song so pure that it made even the spirit of shadow pause. The boy showed that unity and faith could overcome even the deepest silence. As Eliakim spoke, his staff began to glow, and the figures carved into it seemed to come to life. The villagers gathered around him, captivated by the story and the light emanating from the staff. For the first time in years, sound began to fill the air. First as a faint murmur, then as a gentle melody that seemed to rise from the very mountains. Eliakim turned to the villagers. "You do not need a boy with a song. You need each other. The spirit of shadow feeds on separation and despair. Sing together, even if your hearts feel heavy. Your voices are more powerful than you believe." The villagers hesitated, but a child was the first to step forward. She began to sing an old song her grandmother had taught her. Others joined in, and soon the square was filled with voices, each unique yet harmonizing beautifully. The silence shattered like a broken mirror, and a gentle breeze swept through the valley, bringing life back to the village. Eliakim smiled. His staff now bore new figures, a child singing and a shadow being dispersed by light. He knew the valley of silence would never be the same. As he departed, the villagers bade him farewell with gratitude, their voices finally free. Once again, Eliakim felt the power of a story and the strength of hope transforming the world. After leaving the Valley of Silence, Eliakim continued his journey, following the course of a river that wound its way through dark mountains. The river seemed alive, its waters murmuring as if whispering ancient secrets. Along its bank, Eliakim came across a group of travelers gathered around a campfire. They spoke in hushed tones and stared at a distant point where a rope bridge swayed in the wind. Intrigued, Eliakim approached and greeted the group. They were men and women from different villages, each appearing burdened by their own stories. "Greetings, travelers. I am Eliakim, and my path has brought me here. Why are you all stopped?" he asked, pointing toward the bridge. An older man with a grey beard and weary eyes responded with a sigh. "This is the bridge of Kayemba. It's said that no one can cross it. All who try are consumed by fear before reaching the other side." Eliakim looked at the bridge. It was simple, made of ropes and wooden planks, yet there was something ominous about it. The wind that swept across it caused the ropes to creak, as if alive. Below, the river churned, deep and murky, a dark abyss. "Why do you need to cross it?" Eliakim asked. "On the other side lies a village called Tandaza, where the land is fertile and the waters never run dry. Many have tried to reach it, but all returned with heavy hearts. Some say the bridge tests one's courage. Others believe it reveals their deepest fears," the man replied. Eliakim felt his staff pulse gently in his hand. He understood that this was yet another story waiting to be lived. He stood and addressed the group. "Perhaps the secret of the bridge is not about courage, but about something we have yet to understand. Let me try." The travelers watched in astonishment as Eliakim approached the bridge. Each step he took felt heavier than the last. The wind howled, and the creaking of the ropes was almost deafening. Yet Eliakim gripped his staff tightly, trusting in its guidance. As he stepped onto the bridge, something extraordinary happened. The wooden planks began to emit a faint glow, and whispers echoed around him. They were not clear words, but emotions, doubts, fears, regrets. Eliakim felt a weight in his heart, as though his own past failures were being brought to light. Suddenly, a vision formed before him. He saw his village, Kwamkazi, trapped in drought. He saw the children crying and the people looking at him as though all hope was lost. A voice whispered in his mind, "You failed. You left them with no answers." Eliakim closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and remembered the words of the mysterious old man who had given him the staff. Each of us carries stories, but no one must carry the weight of the world alone. With renewed resolve, he responded to the vision. "I did not fail. I brought hope, and I continue to bring it, because hope never ends." The vision dissolved, and the glow on the bridge intensified. The wind stopped, and the silence was replaced by the gentle sound of the river below. Eliakim realized that the bridge was not testing physical courage, but the strength to confront one's inner fears. When he reached the other side, the travelers cheered in celebration. Eliakim raised his staff, which now glowed with new carvings, a crossed bridge and a calm river. He returned to the group and said, "The bridge is not an enemy but a mirror. It shows us what we need to face within ourselves. Do not let fear rule your journey. The fertile land on the other side is not only real, but also a symbol of what we can achieve when we confront our fears." One by one, the travelers began to cross the bridge, inspired by Eliakim's words. Each returned with a renewed expression, as though they had left behind their doubts and discovered something precious within themselves. Eliakim continued his journey, knowing that yet another village had been transformed by the story he had just lived. The bridge of Kayemba, once feared, was now seen as a gateway to self-discovery and courage. Once again, hope had prevailed. After crossing the bridge of Kayemba, Eliakim ventured into a dense forest called Mbilo, known for its towering ancient trees that seemed to touch the sky. The villagers nearby warned that the forest was dangerous, said to be inhabited by spirits that mimicked the voices of travelers. These echoes, as they were called, could drive a person mad or cause them to become hopelessly lost among the shadows. But Eliakim, guided by his staff and his mission to bring hope, entered the forest without hesitation. As he advanced, the daylight faded beneath the tightly woven canopy of trees. The air grew cold, and each step seemed to awaken invisible murmurs. The ground was blanketed with dry leaves that cracked like brittle bones underfoot. After several hours, he began to hear voices. At first, they were indistinct, like whispers carried on the wind, but soon the voices became clear. Eliakim heard his own name. "Eliakim, why do you continue? You cannot save everyone. Give up." He paused for a moment, closing his eyes to focus. He knew that the forest would test his inner strength, just as the bridge of Kayemba had tested his courage. The voices were not real, but they came from something deep within him, doubts he had not even admitted to himself. "I continue because every story I tell plants a seed," he replied aloud, more to himself than to the echoes. "I do not need to save everyone, but each step brings light into the darkness." As he spoke, his staff glowed faintly, as if in approval of his words. He pressed onward, even as the voices grew more insistent. Before long, he came upon a clearing where the ground was strewn with shimmering stones. At its center stood an enormous tree with a twisted trunk, as though shaped by time and pain. The voices now surged into a cacophony, blending screams, whispers, and laughter. Eliakim approached the tree, sensing that it was the heart of the forest, the birthplace of the echoes. Holding his staff tightly, he began to tell a story, his voice cutting through the chaos. There was once a man haunted by voices telling him he was not enough. He became lost in a forest of doubt, but he remembered a small flame within him. Though faint, the flame burned away the lies, lit his path, and revealed that true power comes from believing in oneself. As Eliakim spoke, something extraordinary happened. The voices began to quiet, one by one, until only the sound of his voice remained, echoing through the clearing. The massive tree, once heavy with sorrow, began to bloom. Golden flowers emerged from its branches, casting a gentle, radiant light across the forest. Eliakim touched the tree's trunk with his staff, and a figure appeared etched into the wood, a man surrounded by shadows, holding a small flame. It was the embodiment of the story he had just told. Then, a final voice echoed through the forest, but this time it was soft, almost like a friendly whisper. "Thank you, Eliakim. You have brought peace to the heart of the forest." He looked around and realized the oppressive weight of the forest had lifted. The air felt lighter, the sound of birdsong returned, and sunlight began to filter through the leaves. When Eliakim left him below, he knew he had transformed more than just a place. The people who once feared the forest could now traverse it without dread, learning that facing their inner voices was the path to true peace. His staff, now adorned with new carvings, shone brighter than ever. Eliakim knew his journey was far from over, but the forest of echoes would forever remind him that even in the deepest shadows, the light of hope could prevail. After leaving the forest of echoes, Eliakim ventured into the vast Lumira desert, a place known as much for its beauty as for its dangers. The desert was said to be inhabited by spirits offering false promises to travelers, luring them into mirages of empty hope. It was an unforgiving land, where the sun scorched mercilessly during the day and the cold cut like blades at night. Eliakim knew the desert would present a different kind of trial. While the forest had forced him to confront inner voices, the desert would challenge his ability to discern truth from illusion. On the second day of his journey, with scorching sand beneath his feet, Eliakim began to notice shapes in the distance. Shadows of oases appeared with palm trees and crystal-clear waters so vivid that his parched throat longed for a sip. But his heart knew it was a mirage. He gripped his staff tightly, feeling its familiar warmth, and pressed on. As he continued, the mirages became more persistent. He saw a village in the distance filled with laughter and music and recognized the sounds as those of his own village, Kwamkazi. He paused, hesitating. The vision was so lifelike that it made him doubt. What if it truly was his village? What if his journey had been in vain and the people had found hope without him? Then, a voice floated on the warm wind, sweet and inviting. "Eliakim, why do you continue? Here is everything you've ever wanted. Water, shade, joy. You can rest." He closed his eyes, trying to block out the call. But doubt gnawed at him. He sat on the hot sand, staring at his staff as if seeking answers. That was when he noticed something. The carvings on the staff began to glow softly as though alive. He saw the trees of Umthunzi, the bridge of Kayemba, and the forest of echoes. Each represented a challenge overcome, a reminder that his journey was not just about him but about those who needed his hope. With a determined smile, Eliakim rose to his feet and shouted into the wind, "I do not want empty promises. My journey is not about what I desire, but what I can give." As soon as he spoke these words, the wind stilled, and the mirages began to fade, revealing the desert in its true stark form. Yet Eliakim was no longer alone. A shadow materialized before him, taking the shape of a tall woman with robes made of shimmering sand and eyes that mirrored the sky. "You are unlike the others," the figure said. "Many succumb to my promises, but you chose to see beyond what your eyes perceive. Promises mean nothing without the actions to sustain them," Eliakim replied. "My mission is to carry real stories, ones that transform lives, not illusions that bring only pain." The woman smiled, and her form began to dissolve into grains of sand carried away by the wind. Before she vanished completely, she left a final gift, a small golden stone gleaming as it landed in Eliakim's palm. The stone pulsed with a calm, steady energy, as if it symbolized the truth he had chosen. With his staff glowing and the golden stone in his pocket, Eliakim continued his journey across the desert. He knew his stories were needed more than ever, for the truth and hope he carried in his heart could save those lost in empty promises. When he finally reached the far side of the desert, the sky was painted gold by the setting sun, as if the world itself celebrated his triumph. The Desert of Promises, a place feared by many, had become another chapter in his mission to bring light to the shadows and strength to weary hearts. After leaving the Desert of Promises, Eliakim arrived at the base of a majestic mountain called Kuthwala, known as the Mountain of Truth. Elders from nearby villages told stories of how few ever reached its summit, for the mountain demanded that each traveler confront the weight of their own soul. It was said that those who reached the peak would gain the power to bring definitive transformation to their lives and to all those around them. Eliakim felt the mountain's call deep within his heart. He knew his journey had been leading to this moment. With his staff in hand and the wisdom gathered throughout his travels, he began the ascent. The path was steep and riddled with obstacles. The rocks beneath his feet seemed to hum with ancient memories, and the thin air brought forth doubts he thought he had already overcome. Each step was more difficult than the last, but Eliakim knew he had to keep going. Midway up, a sudden storm erupted. Fierce winds howled, and thunder echoed through the mountain's slopes, as if the earth itself sought to stop him. Battling the tempest, Eliakim once again heard the inner voice he had encountered in the desert. "Why continue, Eliakim? You have done enough. Turn back. You do not need to bear the weight of so many stories." For a moment he hesitated, weary and soaked by the icy rain. But then he raised his staff, now glowing brightly, as though reminding him of every moment he had overcome the impossible. With unwavering resolve he replied, "I do not carry the weight alone. Every story I tell lights a flame in others so they can carry their own light. My mission is not to save, but to inspire." At those words, the storm dissipated, and a ray of sunlight pierced the clouds, illuminating the path to the summit. When Eliakim finally reached the peak, he found a cave. Inside, a crystal-clear lake was surrounded by walls adorned with ancient symbols. At the lake's center, a figure of light emerged, taking the form of the old man Eliakim had met years ago by the dry riverbed. "You have arrived, Eliakim," the figure said with a calm and powerful voice. "But the true journey is only beginning. Look into the lake." Eliakim approached the water and gazed at his reflection. But it was not just his own face he saw. The reflection revealed all the people he had touched through his stories. The villagers of Thunzi, the travelers of the bridge of Kayemba, the children of the Valley of Silence, and even those from the forest and desert. They were all connected by a radiant light flowing from heart to heart. "The lake reflects what you have become," the figure continued. "Your stories are not just words. They are seeds that grow in the hearts of others. Now, you must choose. Return and continue your journey as a simple traveler, or embrace your destiny as the guardian of stories, the one who connects the past, the present, and the future." Eliakim felt the weight of the decision, but then he recalled all the lives he had touched, the hope he had renewed, and he knew his answer. "I accept my destiny, but not as a hero, rather as a servant of the stories and those who need them." The figure smiled and faded away, leaving behind one final instruction. "Every place you visit will be a page in a book that never ends. Keep inspiring, keep walking." The lake glowed brilliantly, and Eliakim felt a surge of warmth flow through his body. As he stepped out of the cave, his staff now carried a permanent glow, like a beacon that would never fade. He understood that his journey did not end here. On the contrary, it was beginning anew, in deeper and more profound ways. From that day forward, Eliakim became more than a traveler. He became a guardian of stories, a keeper of light who connected the hearts of countless lives with the enduring power of hope. Eliakim descended the mountain of truth with a renewed purpose. His stories were no longer mere words. They had become portals that opened hearts, ignited hope, and connected souls. When he returned to Kwamkazi, his home village, he found the land transformed. The river flowed once more, children played in the fields, and the people had planted seeds that now bloomed in abundance. The villagers welcomed him with joy, and he shared his journey. But this time, his stories were not just about courage or overcoming challenges. They were about how each person plays a vital role in the great tapestry of life. "The journey of each of you is a story worth telling," he said to the gathered villagers. "No matter how small it may seem, it has the power to light a flame in another's heart." Eliakim continued his mission, traveling from village to village, from mountain to mountain, inspiring everyone he met. Wherever he went, people said his presence brought light, as if he carried the sun itself in his staff. His steps, etched into the sands of time, taught that true power lies not in individual achievements, but in the ability to share stories that transform lives. And so Eliakim did not merely live, he became eternal, a traveler whose legacy was the hope he sowed in every heart he touched. From generation to generation, his stories continued to be told, carrying the message that, even in the darkest moments, there is always a reason to press on.